Hi there. We're here to continue our series on Thomas Aquinas, Metaphysics and God. And for today, we'll be focused on causation and being. If you recall, there are four central concepts in Thomistic metaphysics that we should try to wrap our minds around. We've already talked about change. And now, before we talk about God, we'll talk about causation and being. Thomas Aquinas basically adopts Aristotle's four causes. Contrary to the popular notion today, there are four types of causes that Aristotle and Thomas Aquinas talk about. The four causes are material cause, formal cause, efficient cause, and final cause. Let's define each of these four causes. Material cause refers to the underlying material stuff that something is made of. In the case of the red rubber ball, it would be rubber. Rubber is the matter of which the ball is made. Formal cause refers to the form, pattern, or structure that something exhibits. Using the same example, the formal cause of the rubber ball is its ballness. Efficient cause refers to what actualizes a potency and brings something into being. If you recall, in our example of the red rubber ball, we changed the color into blue by spray painting it blue. In that case, the efficient cause would be ourselves as the painter, because it was we who actualized the potency of the ball to become blue. Finally, the final cause refers to the end, the goal or purpose of a thing, its functions, but also the range of effects that something is inherently directed towards. If we stick to the same example, in the case of the red rubber ball, its end, goal, or purpose will be to be a plaything, to be a toy, to be used in sport. Final causality is really all about teleology. The value of the four causes is that if we want to be able to understand or explain a phenomenon, it's important for us to be able to identify all four types of causes. Let's use a new and refreshing example. Let's take the human heart. If we want to be able to claim that we understand the human heart, if we want to be able to explain it, it's important for us to know its material cause, its formal cause, its efficient cause, and its final cause. Obviously, it's important for us to know the material of which the human heart is made. So this would refer to the flesh, the veins, the arteries, and all the other components that make up the human heart. But it's not enough to know the material of which it's made. It's also important to know its formal cause. What is its structure? What is the meaning of the hardness of this human organ? It is what distinguishes it from the other human organs. So we could have a field day defining what hardness means. And this would be referring to its form or its formal cause. What about the efficient cause? How would you define the efficient cause of the human heart? What brings the human heart into being? If you're a scientist, if you're a biologist, you would probably talk about the development of the human heart, the process that the human heart undergoes as an organ to develop into a fully functioning human heart. And finally, it's also essential to know the final cause of the heart. What is it for? What are its functions? Obviously, this would include its function of pumping blood and oxygen into the different parts of the body. Now, you may be wondering, why are we belaboring this point? Why are we taking so much time and effort to define the four causes of Aristotle and Thomas Aquinas? And the reason is, there has been a forgetfulness of the four causes. What has happened in modern philosophy is that this notion of four causes has been forgotten. The four causes have been conflated and reduced to only one cause in modern philosophy, and that cause is efficient cause. This conflation of the four causes and their reduction into just the efficient cause really began with David Hume. For Hume, causality is merely the constant conjunction of events. In short, if we have two events, event 1 and event 2, for David Hume, the prior event is the cause, while the second event is the effect. But when you think about it, there is no necessary connection between these two events. Without the notion of final cause, it is quite conceivable that any cause could produce any effect. Contra David Hume, for Aristotle and Aquinas, it is not events that are causes. Rather, it is things that have the causal power. For them, the immediate efficient cause of an effect is simultaneous with it and not temporally prior to it. The way Aquinas puts it, what causes and what is caused must exist simultaneously, such that if the one exists, the other does also. Here are three principles that can help us further understand Thomas Aquinas' notion of causation: the principle of causality, the principle of proportionate causality, and the principle of finality. Thomas Aquinas explains the principle of causality by writing this: everything whose act of existing is other than its nature must have its act of existing from another. Of course, here he is talking about efficient cause, how we need an efficient cause for us to undergo change, including for us to come into existence. If you recall, when we talked about change, we said that change is a movement from potency to act, and it's necessary for an object to have potency for the change to happen. But this potency is only a necessary but not sufficient condition for the change. We need an efficient cause who already has that change in act. Now, to understand how that happens, it is important for us to refer to Aquinas' principle of proportionate causality. According to this principle, effects must be proportionate to their causes and principles, such that whatever perfection exists in an effect must be found in the effective cause. What he's saying here is that an efficient cause will not be able to effect any change unless that effect is already somehow present in the efficient cause. Now, how can we imagine this effect to be present in the efficient cause? Thomas Aquinas talks about three ways. The first is formal, in the mind. The second is eminent, from the source. And the third is virtual, through the action. Let's explain what each one of these means. When we say formal, it means that the efficient cause already has the form as a concept in his or her mind. So when we sprayed the red rubber ball blue, we already had a form blueness in our mind, and that's what enabled us to effect that change. The second way he calls eminent, or from the source. If I decided, for example, to give the rubber ball a little push so that it gets into motion, the energy, the force that set it in motion obviously came from me as the source. And third, virtual, through action. When we melted the rubber ball into goo, our action caused the change. And finally, according to Aquinas' principle of finality, every agent acts for an end. Otherwise, one thing would not follow more than another from the action of the agent, unless it were by chance. For Aquinas, an efficient cause can bring an effect into being only if that is its final cause, meaning the effect is already contained in the efficient cause, whether formally, eminently, or virtually. In short, what Aquinas is saying is that You can only be an efficient cause if that is part of your final cause. Now, this statement could well be Aquinas' critique of Hume's notion of causality, because unless a cause were inherently directed towards an effect, unless that effect were the efficient cause's own final cause, it would not have the causal power to generate that effect. Final cause has been defined as the cause of all causes. What St. Thomas is telling us is that if we forget or reject the notion of final causality, we would be distorting our understanding of efficient causality, or at the very least, our understanding of efficient cause is not complete. In short, we cannot make sense of efficient causality without final causality. Going back to Aquinas' principle of causality, everything whose act of existing is other than its nature must have its act of existing from another. Here he is talking about efficient cause, but he is also talking about existence itself, which brings us to the third and most important concept in Thomistic metaphysics, and that is being. For us to appreciate just how innovative Thomas Aquinas is in his concept of being, let's go back to Aristotle's notion of essence. For Aristotle, essence refers to the structure of a being, its quiddity, its nature. It refers to what this is. For example, the essence of a table is what makes a table a table. To understand the essence of this table, it might be helpful to ask the following questions. What are the essential properties of this table, and what are its accidental properties? Its essential properties would include its stableness, its woodness, and its accidental properties would include its color and its shape. What about humanity? What is the essence of being human? What is this humanity that is supposed to be shared by all human beings? To answer this question, we must distinguish the essential properties of being human from the merely accidental properties. The accidental properties would include things like race, religion, region, and the essential properties would include reason, emotions, relationships, and so on and so forth. According to Aquinas, essence is that through which something is a certain kind of being. The innovation that Thomas Aquinas brings into the metaphysics of Aristotle is evident in his notion of esse. Esse refers to the existence of a being, while essence refers to what this is. Esse is about the fact that this is. While the essence of a table is what makes a table, its esse is what makes a table exist in the first place. Let me quote Aquinas. Every essence or quiddity can be understood without its act of existing being understood. I can understand what a man or phoenix is, and yet not know whether or not it exists in the nature of things. In this way, Thomas Aquinas makes a clear distinction between essence and esse. These two concepts are not the same. How did Thomas Aquinas stumble over this notion of esse, a notion that isn't present in Aristotelian metaphysics? Well, it all started with his problem with angels. When he was thinking about angels, Aquinas realized the inadequacy of Aristotle's categories of form and matter. Because if he limits himself to these categories, nothing will distinguish angels from God. If you don't think about angels, Aristotle's categories of form and matter and act and potency would be sufficient. But as we know, angels are non-material beings. For this reason, they have no matter. They are pure form. In other words, their essence would be their form. Now, if we limited ourselves to these categories of Aristotle, we would be forced to conclude that angels would be pure act with no limitations. But here's the problem. If angels are pure form, and therefore angels, according to the categories of Aristotle, are pure act, what would distinguish them from God? What would make God superior or even just distinct from angels? Now, this is an unacceptable thought for a believer like Aquinas. Needless to say, this is an important question and a difficult dilemma. If form were the ultimate principle of existence, as it is for Aristotle, then angels, which are pure forms, would be pure act and would be no different from God. Here's how Aquinas solved his dilemma. For Aquinas, material beings have two compositions. They have the composition of form and matter, so that form is what makes a being a substance. But material beings also have the composition of esse and essence, where it is esse that makes a substance a being. If you recall in the earlier talk, we defined the essence of a material being as form and matter. When form actuates matter, and matter individuates or limits form, then we have the essence of an object. When all we do is think about and talk about material beings, these categories are quite sufficient. But can the same categories of Aristotle apply to angels? Unlike material beings, their essence is not form and matter, but simply form. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Unlike material beings, spiritual beings like angels have only one composition because they have no matter. And this composition is the composition of esse and essence. Thomas Aquinas writes, in reference to material beings, angels do lack potentiality. Lacking matter, they have no principle of limitation. But angels possess potentiality in reference to their existence, or esse. For Aquinas, the higher principle of being, prior to form, is esse. Form actuates matter, and matter individuates and limits form, and we end up with essence. But essence does not exist yet, unless esse actuates that essence, and that essence limits esse. Only then shall we have a being. The essence of material beings are made of form and matter. The essence of spiritual beings is made of form, but God's essence is esse itself. For Aquinas, God is the pure act of esse, without potentiality, without limitation. God is not a being, but being itself, and he confers being on all beings. He is subsistent being itself, ipsum esse subsistens. I think one way of appreciating the innovation of Thomistic metaphysics is by looking at this diagram. So we have this diagram of form and matter, and of course we have mountains, we have trees, we have animals, and we have people. These are all material substances. And of course we also have spiritual substances like the angels. All these would be different kinds of essences, both material and spiritual. When we bring in God, whose essence is esse itself, it is God, the efficient cause of existence, who confers esse on these different substances, material as well as spiritual, to turn them into material and spiritual beings. It is God's esse that makes these two-dimensional substances rise into three-dimensional beings, as it were. It is God's esse that makes substances beings. For Aquinas, rocks, plants, animals, people, and angels are beings. But God is not a being, but being itself. One metaphor that we can use to imagine how this is the metaphor of a dancer and a dance. The dancer is not the same as the dance. The dancer is infinitely beyond the dance, but the dancer is causing the dance. The dancer confers being to the dance. For as long as the dancer is performing the dance exists. The moment the dancer stops dancing, then the dance ceases to exist. In the same way, God dances all of creation. It is only because God continues to dance creation that we have existence, that beings exist. The moment God stops dancing creation, the moment He stops conferring esse on all these beings, all of us will cease to exist. Thomas's concept of esse captures for us both God's transcendence and immanence. Through this concept of esse, Thomas illustrates for us how God is infinitely above all creatures, but He is also at the same time intimately linked to each one of us. In summary, Aristotle provides us the four causes: that every being has a material cause, a formal cause, an efficient cause, and a final cause. But Thomas Aquinas, through his discovery of the concept of esse, clarifies for us that God is the ultimate efficient cause of all beings, because the final cause of God is precisely to confer esse. He is ipsum esse subsistens.